Here is your review for quiz 4, starting with number 1. We want to solve and graph these two inequalities, 3x plus 3 less than or equal to 0, or 4x plus 1 greater than 9. We're going to solve the first inequality on the left by subtracting 3 from both sides. We'll get 3x less than or equal to negative 3. And then we want to divide both sides by positive 3. And we'll get x less than or equal to negative 1. So to graph this first inequality on the number line, we'll put negative 1 less than or equal to, we should have a closed circle at negative 1, and we're going to shade to the left. The second inequality, we want to subtract 1 from both sides of the inequality. We'll get 4x greater than 8. And then we'll divide by 4. So we'll get x is greater than 2, 8 divided by 4. So we'll graph this on the number line by plotting with an open circle at 2, and x greater than 2 means we're going to shade to the right. So there we have it, number 1. We solved our inequalities and we graphed them on the number line. Number 2, we want to graph a line of this equation, y equals 3/4 x plus 1, using the slope and the y-intercept. Remember, when you have an equation where y is by itself on the left side, that's in slope-intercept form, and the number that's in front of x is going to be your slope. So right here, our slope is 3/4. The number that's behind x is your y-intercept. B stands for y-intercept. So our y-intercept is 1. That's actually how we're going to start graphing. You plot the y-intercept first. So we'll go to our coordinate plane on the y-axis. We'll go to 1 and plot that point. Then we're going to use this slope. Our slope is 3/4. Positive 3 in the numerator means we're going to move up 3 spaces. And the positive 4 in the denominator means we're going to move to the right 4 spaces. So we'll start at 1 and go up 3 spaces, 1, 2, 3, and to the right 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll be right here at 4, 1, 2, 3, at 4, 4. Plot that second point, and then you connect those 2 points to create the graph of this line. And there you have it for number 2. Now for number 3, we want to graph this equation, y equals 4, and then we're going to find the slope. So to graph this equation of y equals 4 on our y-axis, we'll go up to 4, plot that point, and then graph that horizontal line that cuts through the y-axis. This is the graph of y equals 4. Now the slope of this line is going to be 0. We should remember from our notes that the slope of any horizontal line is equal to 0. So our slope for this line is going to be 0. For number 4, we want to write the equation of the line that goes through these 2 points. Now we have 2 points, and we actually have to start by finding the slope of these 2 points. So I'm going to label my first point as x sub 1, y sub 1, and label the second point as x sub 2, y sub 2. And to find the slope, we use our equation. This is our formula we're going to use to find the slope, where we take the difference in the y coordinates and we divide it by the difference in the x coordinates. So y sub 2 minus y sub 1 in the numerator, that will be negative 3 minus negative 13. That's our y sub 1 value. In the denominator, we'll take the difference in the x coordinates. So x sub 2, which is 7, minus x sub 1, which is negative 3. All right, and remember, when you have 2 negatives, you're going to add. So in our denominator, this becomes 7 plus 3, or 10. And in the numerator, negative 3 minus negative 13, that'll be plus 13. Negative 3 plus 13 would be positive 10. And 10 over 10 would make our slope 1. Once you find the slope, then you'd use that slope to actually write the equation using that point slope form. So we're going to take that slope, and let's move our graph over a little bit. So let's move it over a little bit. So our slope is equal to 1. We're going to take this slope and one of our points. So I'm just going to choose the first point. It doesn't matter which point you choose. That first point is -3, -13. And we're going to use our point slope form, y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1 to write this equation. All right. Now, when we're writing this equation, we're just going to substitute 3 values. The slope, our m, would be +1. And then for the x sub 1 and y sub 1 values, we're going to substitute -3 right here for x sub 1 and -13 for y sub 1. So when we do that substitution, we'll get y minus -13 equals our slope, which is 1, times x minus -3. All right, close those parentheses. And anytime we have those two negatives, remember that becomes addition. So that's y plus 13 equals, and then 1 times the x minus -3, that will just be x plus 3. We'll solve this equation by subtracting 13 from both sides. And we're really just rewriting the equation so that it is in slope-intercept form. Our directions ask us to write the slope-intercept form, and that's why we need to get y by itself on the left. So when we subtract that 13, we'll get y equals x, and then 3 minus the 13 will give us -10. So we're done. Here's our equation, y equals x minus 10. Now for problem number 5, it's 2 parts. You have to write 4 equations, 2 equations of a line that's parallel to this given line, the -3x plus 8y equals -2, and then 2 equations that's perpendicular. Now what we know about parallel lines is that they have equal slopes. So really, once we find the slope of the given line, that slope should be the same for the 2 equations on the left. And the same goes for the 2 equations on the right. We want to write our 2 equations, but understanding that the slopes of perpendicular lines, they're opposite reciprocals. So they're going to have opposite signs, and then they're going to be reciprocals of each other. Okay, and look like my marker's not really writing as clear. Okay, so for the given equation, we first want to find the slope. So we're really just going to solve this equation for y, put it in slope-intercept form. That means we're going to add 3x to both sides and divide by 8. So add 3x, and we'll get the 3x's will cancel on the left side, leaving 8y equals 3x minus 2. And then we want to divide by 8. Divide everything by 8. And we're really only concerned with our slope. So our slope is going to be this number that's in front of the x term, 3/8. Therefore, when we write the equations of the lines that are parallel, we should have that same slope, 3/8. And to write the first equation, that will be an easy way to write one equation. Use the slope only. So y equals 3/8 x. That could be equation 1. 3/8 x. For equation 1 of the perpendicular line, we're going to have the opposite reciprocal of 3/8. So this time we want our sign to be opposite of positive, and then we'll take the reciprocal of that fraction. So we're going to flip it over and we'll get -8/3. So that first equation For the perpendicular lines, we could write as y equals negative 8/3 x. All right, and now for the second equation, you could use any value you substitute there. That will be fine. For the y-intercept, just make sure that the slopes are the same. So y equals 3/8 x plus 6. Use some other value for the y-intercept. And then for equation 2 over here, y equals negative 8/3 x, and then some other y-intercept, so minus 7. And then you're done. You have your two equations of lines that are parallel and two equations of lines that are perpendicular.